This week on the Dim Din podcast.
Ubuntu, an African philosophy that emphasizes community, interconnectedness, and the belief that I am because we are.
There are so many things that my grandparents taught me that whose lessons I didn't learn until I was an adult now. So all I'm saying is do not underestimate the power of planting the seeds. When we plant the seed, we have no power in controlling when they're going to germinate. Our job is to continue watering and cultivating and hope that at some point the lesson will be received. So as parents, we do not have the liberty and freedom to quit on our children because we think, well, this is a Western world. So we are responsible for instilling those values and teaching what's left of our cultures that is left. For instance, if you speak your own language at home, you're teaching them cultural pride. If you have given them an African name, for instance, and you're addressing them by that name when you're at home, you may not see the power of that, but one day, whenever that is, it's going to be meaningful at some point.
The Dim Din podcast, a safe space to talk about misconceptions, perceptions, assumptions, and frustrations. Join us for conversations and stories that explore how embracing our differences leads to a balanced, strong, and harmonious world.
Ubuntu, an African philosophy that emphasizes community, interconnectedness, and the belief that I am because we are. I genuinely have a strong belief that as humans, we have a strong connection with each other. And if we choose to see those connections, then we're better able to work together and see more productivity in the interest of humanity. I am here today to have a conversation about that very concept. Before we go to the guests that we have today, I just want to send a shout out to all Sierra Leoneans because our Independence Day is just around the corner, would be next week. So happy Independence celebration on April 27th to myself and all Sierra Leoneans, hence the look, green, white, and blue. I am your host, Becca, and this is the Dim Din podcast where we have conversations about misconceptions, perceptions, assumptions, and frustrations that Africans in the diaspora do experience. To have this conversation with me today, I have the beautiful Shayla Dube, who is joining us from Vegravel, and I would have introduced her, but I promise you I cannot do that introduction justice. So I'm going to pass it over to her as she joins us in her beautiful attire. She is in her queenly spirit, and I am so excited to have this conversation with her. Thank you so much for joining us on the Dim Dim podcast, Shayla.
Thank you for having me, Becca. Interestingly, when I am asked to introduce myself, I always look at the fact that in the Western side of the world, when you ask people to talk about who they are so quick to tell you about what they do. Yet the question is about who am I? So you asked me to introduce myself, and in as much as I will talk about what I do, I just want to begin by sharing about who I am, and to do that in a way that uplifts Ubuntu. I just want to give a quick description of myself because just in case some of your viewers are visually impaired, it's important that we do not leave anyone behind. And I also think that it's a gentle reminder that all of us are temporarily able-bodied, and one day we won't be able to see. So it's important that we normalize this conversation and inclusion of everyone. So I am wearing a predominantly orange outfit. It has some black and some creamish. The material is African print. and it was made by a seamstress in Zimbabwe, and it's a mom and son duo. So her son Kosi made the dress, and the mom made the hat, all the way from Zimbabwe. And I'm wearing prescription glasses as well. I have beautiful brown skin that is racialized as black, and I'm wearing very big wooden earrings, and they have a tree carved in. In my background, I have some fake plants around me, and a djembe drum to my right, and there's a beautiful art of the world behind me that was done by a local artist in Vegreville. So I want to start there because this is part of who I am, the inclusion part, and being equity responsive is part of what I do and who I am as well. I am a mother first, a mother of 3 beautiful humans whom I have the privilege and blessing to co-parent with my partner of almost 18 years. He's very anti-social media and stuff, but I do make sure that I mention him because none of us are self-made. For me to show up here, it means he's supporting me somehow, taking care of the kids and all of that. So hence the need to mention him. And it would be very fake of me to show up here and not acknowledge that I am a product of the people that came before me. And that includes my grandparents who actually raised me. So I am my grandparents' daughter. They raised me since I was 7 months old. My grandfather is 93 years old, and my grandmother is turning 85 this year. They are still alive, and they are in Zimbabwe. And so I can't talk about who I am without first giving them a shout out, because all that I am speak to the aspects of Ubuntu that you talked about earlier on when you said I am because you are, and I like to say I am because they are. Those are just some aspects of who I am. I've been in Canada for 21 years, and I like to position myself as a sojourner because all of us are in this world temporarily, and I also acknowledge that I am an uninvited guest because in as much as I may have come here legally, I acknowledge that I am on stolen lands, and the indigenous people who are the traditional owners of these lands did not invite me. So I want to acknowledge that because it's an important part of our identities as migrants, even though, yes, some of our ancestors were enslaved on these lands, but we do benefit from the ongoing colonialism and ongoing cultural erasure of indigenous peoples of these lands. So I think all those pieces contribute to who I am and how I show up in the many spaces that I occupy. I wear multiple hats, one of them being a social worker, a clinical social worker, clinical supervisor, and I'm also a part-time professor, University of Calgary, and one of the courses that I'm passionate about is the Afrocentric social work, because most of the curriculums that we have are very Eurocentric. So when I get to teach Afrocentric, that means you better count on the fact that Ubuntu is going to be there. So without further ado, I don't want to spend 2 hours talking about myself, but those are some aspects that make me who I am, that also influence how I show up in the multiple spaces that I have the pleasure of occupying.
Wow. I knew I would not have been able to do that justice. In your introduction, you have successfully taken the Dim Dim podcast to a whole different level by including not just our blind brothers and sisters, but also that land acknowledgement that does acknowledge that we are on stolen land. And I love how you said, we are uninvited guests, even though we came here legally. Oh, Thank you so much for reminding me of the importance of being inclusive, and especially the pieces that we tend to forget about. And I'm going to follow up on that by also giving a little bit of a description of what I am wearing. I have a headpiece on. It has some cowries on it. The colors are green, white, and blue, and it's an African material as well. It was made by Isako Designs, a beautiful young lady by the name of Adama in Senegal, and I trust her for most of my African pieces that I do wear. But that's a little bit about what I have on. The sets, describing the set might take a whole lot of, might take quite a bit of time. So we'll talk about it as we go. But thank you for speaking to the very core of Ubuntu, that aspect of diversity, that aspect of inclusivity, as you were sharing a little bit about yourself. To add to that a little bit more, can we talk about the origin of Ubuntu?
Right. So when I first want to really put a disclaimer that every time we find ourselves unpacking culture, it's very important that I do it with so much humility, recognizing that I've had to learn, like I said earlier on, from our elders, and our elders learned from their elders. So we're talking intergenerational wisdom here. And when we talk about Ubuntu, I think that even when we say, I am because you are, in as much as when I came to Canada, I think I may have embraced that term. It wasn't until recently that I sat down and asked myself that, what does it mean to say I am because you are? And I do think that it is really an appropriated vision of what Ubuntu is, because when we look at Ubuntu through the African lenses, when we talk about Ubuntu, it is beyond a philosophy. It's more of a worldview. It's a way of being. And the word Ubuntu cuts across different tribes, the Ndebele people, the Zulu people, the Xhosa people. Even though it is from the language of isiNdebele and isiZulu, when we say Ubuntu, it is derived from a proverb that says umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, and what that means is, the loose translation of that is a person because of other human beings. And when you listen to that again, it says a person is a person because of other human beings. It doesn't say I am because you are. And I think that the I am piece, what makes me think it's an appropriated vision is because in the West, we are so, in the Western world, we are so consumed with me, myself, and I. I don't know how many times I've heard people say, I'm self-made. Oh, self-made billionaire. But in all honesty, none of us are self anything. From the very first time that we hit the world, to come into the world, other people bring you into the world, including your mom, of course, but you've got people that are receiving you, whether it's doctors or midwives. And until your last breath, nobody buries themselves, right? So from the beginning to the end and throughout, our lives are interconnected with other human beings. And I think that to look at Ubuntu through its true essence is to actually recognize that it's the interconnectedness of all planetary beings beyond you and I. So that means we think of the Creator, we think of the ancestors, we think of the Mother Earth, and all those parts, all those pieces are all aspects of Ubuntu beyond just humans. And if it was just me and you, I am because you are, I think you would agree with me that right now Mother Earth is burning and and bleeding, and we wouldn't survive, just the two of us or me and you. We're just really a drop in an ocean. But when we do look at Ubuntu, we look at all aspects of it, and that includes non-humans, and that includes the creator. And as African people, we've always been spiritual people. The um, how do we get in touch with the creator has always looked different, but the concept of Ubuntu beyond the Nguni tribes that I mentioned earlier on goes beyond African people. The Maori people of Australia do have a similar aspect of connectivity, of communal solidarity. The Filipino people, they call it kapwa. It looks different from one community to the other, but I want to say that it is really practiced by almost all non-Western communities. It's an aspect of living life and seeing other human beings as an extension of you. Not there's no me and us. There's no me and there's no me without you. It's really just about the us piece. Like how do I show up and worry about how my existence impacts the other person? So in a nutshell, really that's how I can try and butcher the definition of what Ubuntu is, because I don't think that there are some things that do not need to be translated into a colonial box. And I think Ubuntu is one of those things we can try. And this is what I'm doing. I'm attempting to take a sacred way of knowing and being and try to fit it into a colonial box. And I think that that's what happens. It gets lost. The meaning gets lost somewhere. But I do hope that in the attempts that I have made, it gives you a picture of what Ubuntu is. It really stems from the oral traditions, the ancestral wisdom, and the practices passed down. So I'll give you an example. In the village where I grew up, if you did something that was not congruent with the values that you were raised in, that we respect our elders and all of that, your parents will say things like "Bunga po ubuntu ba ako?" and that really translates to where is your Ubuntu, because it's really weaved in the fabric of everyday life. It's not like a selective cultural competency that you get to pick down when you want to or when you want to sound cool. It's really a way of being. It's how you show up in your everyday life. How do you relate with other human beings? How do you talk to people? How do you respond? And it also includes mutual aid. And the example that I can give you is, if I ran out of milk and sugar, if I would go to my neighbor before I go to the store, and there would be no shame.
That is, right? Back home in Africa somewhere. Here, I don't know if I know my neighbor that way.
Absolutely, that's what I mean. That's where Ubuntu comes from. Absolutely, and I think that's where Ubuntu get lost, because you come in here, you say hi to your neighbor, and they don't even say hi back, and that's how we start losing some aspects of it, because we have to adjust, we have to assimilate. They say when you're in Rome, you do what Romans do. So when you come to Canada, there is no Ubuntu that I see on a daily basis. So you start to adjust so that you're not seen as awkward. I ran out of tomatoes in Christmas, I don't know which year, and the stores were closed. And I said to my husband, let me just go and ask our neighbor. And my husband was like, you're not doing that. This is a small town and you're not going to embarrass us like that. But I was just going back to the roots. That where I come from, I can go to my neighbor and say, do you have extra tomatoes? When the stores are open, I'll bring you back whatever you lent me. But that's Ubuntu.
But that's exactly where I want to go next, because from everything I've heard you say, and thank you, by the way, you did that justice. And I'm sure that the ancestors are proud, as I am, because just hearing how you have taken your time in humility to describe what it is and the origin, I have learned a lot more about the whole aspect of it. And you just pointing out it's not just a philosophy. From what I hear you say, it's like a lifestyle, and it's something that should guide our day to day, not just something you choose to do because you feel like it on a given day. But that being said, yes, we have migrated to a country
Right.
that may not necessarily practice a similar belief system or a similar value. But if we were taught that this is a lifestyle, then it does not just leave us or depart from us because we are in an environment where it's not supported or recognized necessarily.
Right.
So how do we as Africans in the diaspora work together to sort of like live our, like maintain these belief systems that were passed on to us?
Right. And I want to address what you said. I think we have to be very cognizant of realizing that the Canada that we have now is not the turtle island that it was before colonial invasion.
Right.
So the indigenous people here, they lived the Ubuntu way with their hunting and their traditional ways of being. When you listen to them, they may not call it Ubuntu, but they lived in the same way that we did, the Ubuntu way. So when we came to Canada, we obviously got assimilated into the colonial vision of Canada. And they say that if you don't know who you are, people will tell you who you are and you will believe them. So it's very important that we know who we are so that we can retain and reclaim those aspects of Ubuntu. We can't really reclaim something that we don't even know. So it's really a question of going back to the roots and starting to treat our elders like the wisdom keepers and the custodians of knowledge that they were. Because now we put PhDs on a pedestal. We look for colonial titles, but when we look at our Ubuntu ways of knowing, we knew that our elders knew the way. You didn't ask them to prove anything. You didn't ask them to tell you how old they were or to prove their experience to us. There was no institutional validation needed. So if we are going to if we're gonna rebuild or bring those aspects of Ubuntu somehow, we gotta begin by treating our elders like the wisdom keepers that they were. And there is an African proverb that says the kids walk faster, but the elders know the way. So it's really going back to that and remembering that they know the way. So how can we reclaim that and restore that respect that they deserve and start to ask them to lead us the right way and ask and retain what's left, because it's really the remnant of what's left. Colonialism is very, it's a weapon of destruction. Where it goes, it destroys. So whatever's left really requires some repairing of ruptures, some rebuilding, some mending, and that really means going back to where we began, right? Going back to our pre-colonial ways, whatever's left of it, and that requires us really, I think, for the most part, is finding the elders in any of our communities. So it's not really just me looking for Zimbabwean elders, but it's knowing that even when I see an indigenous elder, there's something that I can learn from them. When I visit Ghana and go to the village and talk to a grandma there, there's something that I can learn and retain and also share with others, because knowledge is only powerful if it's shared. And just like our gifts, they are only meaningful if they are used to benefit the rest of the community. So when you
Wonderful.
ask me what can we do in Canada, what I'm thinking of the practical ways of um, finding ways to build our villages, whether it's in the churches or for those that go to church, and building mentorships and having conversations like this. It's really every little step in the long run helps. So how do we create our own spaces? We keep waiting to be invited to tables. You hear, oh, we're looking for invitations instead of building our own tables. Because
Right.
if we wait for the colonial powers to be the ones that give us permission, that will never come, because colonialism relies on us not knowing who we are. When we are confused, colonialism thrives. So it
Right.
is within us as a people to figure out our own ways of questioning, how do I know what I know? Right? Because most of what we
Right.
know is the colonial knowledge.
Right, right, right. How do I know what I know? I love everything you've said. And I think the main thing that I get out of that is that we should be willing and able to turn back to leaning onto our elders for guidance,
Right.
because they have been here before us. The piece that I have with that, or the follow-up question that I'll have for that is, I was fortunate to attend Bluequills University. It's an indigenous university in St. Paul, and it was a
Okay.
residential school as well,
Right.
for my diploma in social work. And I'm so grateful that I got that opportunity, because it really helped
Mm-hmm.
ground me and challenge me
Mm-hmm.
to ask myself questions about who I am, who I really am.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, they do practice, have a similar practice of even before, like going on the land and asking for permission, like that belief that sitting on the land helps connect you to the land. If they
Yeah.
hunt, they seek permission to eat, and they only hunt for what they need. So like beliefs like that, that relationship there should be between us and other creatures of the land, or or what we think may be lifeless, like the tree and all.
Right. Right.
But during my time there, one of the instructors had said something that had so much value that I still hold on to today. And that was, when colonization was nearing its end, the colonizer looked for a group of people within the tribe and chose to instill in them a belief that they were better than the
Right.
others,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
pass that on as a way of continuing their, like the colonizers' ways of knowing and doing, even when the colonizer was not in the picture. So now, even here in the diaspora, and this is something that's happening in my community currently, where there is a strong division because a leader
Yeah.
thought he is the only one that can do it. He's the only one with the degrees. And
Right.
without him, the community will not stand, and nobody can continue from where he left off. So he's choosing to hold on to that leadership and not passing
Right.
it on, even though the people are saying, I want different. So to speak to the leaders, right? Because that's an elder. But when I look at him,
Mm.
I don't feel like he would be able to lead me
Oh yeah.
because of
I'm
those things, right?
right. So perhaps I like that you say that, because um you remind me of the proverb when we say it takes a village to raise a child. Um, I always mention Dr. Miriam Sekandi, who was your previous guest.
Yes.
When she wrote the book, It Takes a Village to Wreck a Child, that alone is a testimony that if it takes a village to raise healthy children, or if it takes a village to build a healthy society, it also takes that same village to harm, right? So what we are saying that a burning village will breed toxic leaders, right? Because even elders are part of the village, right? So it doesn't mean they are immune to to the scenes of colonialism, or rather the impacts of colonialism and all of its many impacts. So we have to then look at the leaders that are doing their inner work, the healers that are the elders that are healing, because you can be a harmful elder as well. It doesn't mean when we say we knew that the elders knew the way, it doesn't mean that even back then all the elders were leading the way the right way, which is why we've got some kids that have been harmed by elders as well. So I think it's real. That's why it has always been a communal responsibility. It's not left to one person, because as human beings, we are flawed, and that includes our elders as well. So when you have more than one elder that you're connected to, one of those elders will be the one that leads the way or help you see that the other elder may need some help themselves. So it's not to put elders on a pedestal, but I think it's just to look at our ways of knowing and teachings. And I think it also talks about it, we also got to look at the fact that our elders inherited trauma as well,
Lots of
right?
it. Yeah.
And so when that trauma is inherited, that's how intergenerational trauma happens. But in order for us to claim that intergenerational wisdom, it requires all the levels of humanity, from the children to the youth to the elders. Because when we have that relational accountability, we can be able to help each other when we have those elders that are that still have to do the healing work. And I want to say healing, and I want to be careful in saying healed, because the moment we put a D, we make it as a destination, yet healing is really an ongoing journey. So it's really looking at all those pieces to say, can we all do our internal work? Because all of us are colonized. So when all of us are colonized, it means we all have some healing to do. And that includes all human beings, really, of all cultures and creeds and ethnicity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, I love everything you just said about that. And I have nothing else to add to that, because I think it was clear and concise. Speaking to the same value then, our children that are born here, they tend to say that we don't necessarily understand what life is like here for them, and we don't have the knowledge that it takes to an extent to parent them here, because what we know is for the African ways of knowing and being. So parents who may be struggling with balancing that knowledge that they had, or that was passed on to them, or that wisdom that was passed on to them, and the challenges that they experience in passing those on here, given the culture and the ways of knowing here, how can they walk that path?
To be honest, I'm even as I'm thinking and reflecting and introspecting, looking at my journey, there are so many things that my grandparents taught me that whose lessons I didn't learn until I was an adult now. So all I'm saying is, do not underestimate the power of planting the seeds. When we plant the seed, we have no power in controlling when they are going to germinate.
Woo.
Our job is to continue watering and cultivating and hope that at some point the lesson will be received. So as parents, we do not have the liberty and freedom to quit on our children because we think, well, this is a Western world. So we are responsible for instilling those values and teaching what's left of our cultures that is left. For instance, if you speak your own language at home, you're teaching them cultural pride. If you have given them an African name, for instance, and you're addressing them by that name when you're at home, you may not see the power of that, but one day, whenever that is, it's going to be meaningful at some point. So I say that because even as I said, I grew up in the village, I really thought it was an inconvenience back then. And at some point, I would even ask my mom, please write my grandma a letter and say, you need me in town this holiday so I don't go there and avoid the working in the fields. But only now that I realize all the skills and all the values that were instilled in me and all the we talk about kids here being entitled, but we also do not really look at it in a bigger picture, that we haven't really showed them what it means to exist in a community. Because when you're in a village, for instance, right, if you have a neighbor coming in to ask for cooking oil and we've normalized that, the kids may not have the power to say, oh yeah, here, take this much, but they are watching and they are seeing and they are learning something from that. So I think it really boils down to not just planting the seeds, but consistently doing so. Because a lesson is only learned through repetition. So when they see you constantly instilling those values of reciprocity, communal solidarity, interconnectedness, interdependence, right? If you're a mom and you're struggling and you don't get help, your child is learning that, oh, there's shame in asking for help. But when they see you asking for help and being able to receive that help, then they learn that in life we don't struggle alone. We are supposed to tap into the help of the community. So it's really in the everyday of our practices that we can restore what we want to teach our children. So if we're not practicing it, they're not going to learn anything, because children really learn from what they witness, not so much about our words, but more so of our actions.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think you ended that really well, because what I hear you say then is that the teachings and the lessons is not just from what we say, but also from what we do. More importantly, what we do, because if our words don't match our actions, then the kids are more confused than anything. Okay. To round this up, and I know time flies, time goes by fast. I can have this conversation all day. But to round this up, I see, like I mentioned at the start of this conversation, it's independence celebration coming up here in a couple weeks. And so many African countries who were colonized are celebrating independence and the freedom that comes with it. But at the end of the day, I see we're struggling to gain mental freedom, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Like, we have that physical freedom, but we're struggling to gain that mental freedom. And I think because of that, we're struggling to work together to develop our countries and to practice the spirits, like to go back to the roots of the spirit of Ubuntu. I don't know if you see that, but I see that quite often. And so even when I'm celebrating independence, I always try to reflect and ask myself, what am I celebrating? And I've had a few people struggle with that. Like, can we speak to that to end our conversation today? Can we speak to what could be causing that? How do we go from here? How do we get to a point where we can actually celebrate freedom because we experience it physically and mentally?
Right. Well, I think the question is loaded, because we gotta remember that just because you ended colonization physically, epistemically we didn't, right? When we talk about
Ooh.
epistemology, we are talking about ways of knowing, right?
Mm.
So that dilemma and the heaviness of what am I celebrating, I think it's really part of the journey, and it's important that we remind ourselves of the responsibility that we have of unlearning binary ways of knowing that says it's either this or that,
Ooh.
but rather embracing the discomfort of I am celebrating the peace, that I'm celebrating the part that we are no longer colonized as we used to be,
Mm.
but I'm also grieving the part that when we were colonized, we were impacted in ways that grossly um, changed us as a people, and we are still healing from that. So in this celebration, there's grief and gratitude instead of
Ooh.
thinking that you gotta choose one or
Grief
the
or
other,
gratitude.
because that healing process, like I said, is an ongoing, it's a lifelong journey. So to decolonize is not just a tick box, it's really a lifelong commitment of unlearning, relearning, and continued growth and healing. So as we celebrate our physical independence or the commemoration of that, I think we can choose to center both comfort and discomfort without feeling that it needs to look a certain way. It needs to look one thing. The linear way of things is the colonial way of doing that often puts us into boxes. Remember, we were we were a diverse group of Africans, and colonizers just came in and said, "You're black." They just put us in one color, and all of a sudden, our diversity is into just this one word. So we gotta remember that that is the colonial way of doing, to feel like we things need to fit into a bowl, into a neatly decorated box. So to
Mm.
answer your question, yes, that independence comes with a lot of layers and cumulative grief and um, lots of traumas, the intergenerational, the institutional, the cultural. There's a lot of layers there, and it's okay to still celebrate, because we don't only celebrate when we get to our destination, but we also got to celebrate the journey
Beautiful.
of where we are now.
Beautiful, beautiful. So as much as independence comes with many layers, we
Right,
still have a lot to celebrate. There's the gratitude and the grief. And we choose to
right,
center ourselves in both of that as we continue to walk on our journey. We continue to heal, because healing is an ongoing process,
right.
and decolonization is an ongoing process. Oh, thank you so much, Shayla. I really, really, really do appreciate having you here today to have this conversation with us. I'm hoping we can further this conversation at at another time, because you really do have a lot of wisdom to share, and I'm sure that the viewers are very, very, very grateful for your presence and the wisdom that you've shared with us today. Oh,
Right. And
that.
can I just add one thing? And just one simple way to that we underestimate is the power of speaking our own languages, right?
Ooh.
Uh, and being okay with a name that nobody else can pronounce, and knowing that this is part of me, this is part of my identity, this is my culture. So when you ask me what are the some what are some of the practical ways, sometimes those are the practical ways. And even just eating your fufu or um, egusi soup or whatever it is that you consider a delicacy in your own country, and giving yourself permission without seeking the colonial validation of whether that's healthy enough or not, right? It's those pieces, and I hope that we can start doing that. And when we do, again, Rome wasn't built in a day, so it's the little pieces that we we can do that contribute to that. So
Beautiful.
without rumbling, I'll send it back to you there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And this may not make sense to a lot of people, but we wear it with pride because it is a part of who we are. And it does represent us one way or the other. To all Miss Salon people, I want wish you now happy Independence Day or celebration as they come up next week. And I am choosing to speak a little bit of the Creole because, of course, that's how we continue to celebrate the gratitude of the independence that we have gained. Thank you all so much for being here with us. Until our next episode, I am your host, Becca, and Sabe Sandimdi.